こんにちは。
こんにちは。Hello.
Hello, I'm Dalton.
I'm Aoi.
And today we're talking about 言語学習 or language acquisition, language learning, language studying.
はい。
Again, as we said in the last episode, I speak English and Japanese.
そして私が
Yeah.
同じく日本語英語だけど英語勉強中です。
I mean, yeah, I'm still studying Japanese too. But
本当？結構もうレベル高いよ。
well, I'm still studying.
Thank you.
I used to be an English teacher at one point. Not for a super long time, but I taught online for a while. And I taught in Japan, and then I taught online for a while.
じゃあオンライン2回もしてたんだ、先生するの。
I suppose so, yeah. It was sort of before and after a bunch of other types of work. So English teaching is not a major part of my career, but it was, maybe a year or so, a big focus. So
先生
yeah, between teaching myself Japanese and teaching lots of other people English, I've learned a lot about language acquisition, skill acquisition, and I'd love to just talk back and forth with you about all of that.
all of that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your English learning journey so far.
私の英語の勉強の仕方。
Not how you study yet, we'll get there, but sort of the whole story. Like when did you first start learning English?
歴史ね。
Yeah. When did you first start learning? How did it develop from there? What were the big ups and downs of your story?
Okay.
Go ahead.
まず日本でも義務教育で英語があるから、小学校の途中からかな、少しずつ英語の授業が入ってきて、そして大学生まで多分ずっと英語の授業はついてくるものだから、一応何年トータル何年なんだろう。まあ、10年以上。
Yeah.
まあ、英語のクラスを受けてるし、勉強してるはずですが、私の英語はそのレベルではない。その何十年も勉強してるレベルではない。
Yeah, I hear that a lot from students in Japan specifically, and from a lot of other countries too, is they take the classes for years and years and years, but the teachers themselves usually are not native speakers.
Yeah.
And they usually
True.
don't really like it that much. It's not really fun. They're kind of forced to do it, and so they don't really try to learn it as much.
そうだね。結構その英語の授業の仕方は日本ですごく問題になってるから、なんかもっとグローバル化をしたいんだったら力を入れるべきっていうニュースとかをね、目にしたりもするの。だから、そうやって言ってる人も多いんだと思う。
Yeah.
そう。ってことで私の英語は、英語の勉強をするモチベーションが作られなかったから、なかなか英語力がアップしなかったんだよね。
Yeah.
だから、そうだな。最近やっとこの1、2年で英語を勉強ようやくスタートしたって感じだから。
Right.
だからすごくね、時間がかかったし、いろんな意味で。早くたどり着きたかったな、この楽しい英語の勉強の仕方にって今気づいてるから。
Yeah.
はい。
So,
シェアしたい。
yeah, that last thing that you said was really interesting. Like you weren't really enjoying or having fun with your English studies
そ
before.
こが大事だもんね。
Yeah. Tell me about what was the style like in Japan? What was it that you were learning and doing in class that made it feel so not fun?
OK、学校で楽しくないってさせられた感じはね、ひたすら単語を書くとか、こう点数を取るために単語を覚えさせられるとか、ここ大事、覚えさせられる。とか、あとは、一番今、困らせられてるのは、その時に覚えさせられたカタカナの読み方。カタカナイングリッシュですごく今、つまずいてて、ネイティブみたいにお話ししたいのに、それプラス、この単語を知ってて話せるのに、 最初の1回目のエピソードでも言ったけど、バッテリーみたいな感じで、
Yeah.
その発音ですごく、英語がすごく立ち止まっちゃうね。
Yeah.
だから、この、今、2つ挙げた？この2つが一番大きいポイントかな。私のバッド、
Yeah.
経験。
Yeah. It's something that I hear a lot. Like, most people either they don't really care about English, they don't want to learn it in the first place, or they do want to learn it, but they're not having fun because, as you just said, like you're just being forced to learn a bunch of vocabulary and you're speaking with other non-native speakers in a non-native way.
Yeah.
And so you're just having to like memorize these robotic phrases without actually getting to enjoy the purpose of having a language, like communicating with people and doing cool new things with it.
そう。もう一つ挙げていい？
Yeah, please.
それで言うんだったら、なんか学校でもらうテキストブックに載ってる会話。4個か5個ぐらいの小さい会話だけど、それでコミュニケーションを覚える。そしてあと日本語でグラマーを覚える。なんか、何々しなければならないとかを日本語で覚えて英語を見る。だから、なんかこう、義務感になるんだよね。覚えなきゃ。だからコミュニケーションするときも、何々しなければならないだからってなっちゃうのさ、頭で。
Right.
だからそれがすごく立ち止まらせるよね。
Yes, it makes it very, very hard to learn any sort of language fluently if you're always trying to translate it.
そう、ありがとう。話させてくれて。
Yeah. I totally agree with everything that you said. I've had similar experiences in my own studies, but how have things changed for you now that you're on the other side, where now you're starting to enjoy it more, you're actually getting to use it? Like, what has kind of changed for you in your relationship to English?
今と違うところはね、多分環境がすごく一番関わってくるけど、でも自分自身で勉強するってなった時に実践するところがあるっていうのと、きっと今日本でもたくさん英会話教室とか外国の方の出入りが多いから、なんか話しかけれたり友達になれたりとか、アプリ使ってとかできると思うし、なんかそうやって積極的に英語を話す人とコミュニケーション取りに行こうとするのが大事だと思うんだよね。し、わかんなかったら今、なんか翻訳アプリとかわかんないから自分でメモ取ったりとか、それでちょっと待ってみたいな。Wait a second みたいな。し、なんか、ごめんね、まだ英語勉強中なのとか言ったら、OK って言って待っててくれるし、なんかそうやって少しでも英語脳にする時間を増やせばいいんだと思う。テキストブックも全部英語のバージョンにしてみたりとかね。そう。なってる？
I totally agree. Do you feel like, or let me ask it this way. What have been some ways that you've been like having fun with English now that things are different? Because, I live with you, we live together here in the US, and I see the way that you do things. So I could think of a couple answers for you, but like you're not just always sitting there memorizing vocabulary, right? You engage with English in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that you've been having fun learning the language?
それは結構趣味とかも英語で楽しむっていうので、例えば料理も英語のレシピを見て、勉強しつつ楽しむとか、あとはそれこそ
That's a big change, by the way. Like when we first like moved in together, you would only look up recipes in Japanese, and then there were a couple of times where you're like, oh my god, I can't find this recipe or this ingredient or whatever, and I would just look it up in English. I'd be like, it's right here, like it's super easy, just look it up in English. And at first you were kind of like, oh, but it's so mendokusai because I have to like slowly read all of this weird cooking vocabulary, but
そうそっちの方が時間がかかるっていうのも知ったし、例えば小麦粉、フラワーを、待って、フラワーって何？じゃなくて。
And then you have to look at like the tiny conversions, like the cups to the, だ
からね、あとオーブンの温度とかもね、
Yeah.
日本語のレシピだと、C の丸で、
That was so funny the first
あったよね、その間違いの時。全然温まんないんだけど、みたいな。
Yeah.
C、こっちは F の度の方だから、
Yeah.
その倍ぐらいだよね、だいたい日本のその表記とは。温度の厚さが。だから、マジ3時間ぐらいこれ焼いてんだけど、みたいな感じになって。そういうこととかも結構関わってくるから、っていうのもあるけど、でも普通に英語の勉強としてそれを取り入れたら、全然なんか自分のリーディングスピードとかも変わったし。
You've been reading books too?
Yeah. Kids book だけど。
Yeah, I mean, kids books are perfect. Those books are not like kids books. Those are real
Thank you.
books.
多分、ティーンぐらい、違う、ティーンよりしないぐらい、あれは。
Definitely like an older kid, like upper elementary, lower middle school, for sure.
あと他なんだろう。シャドーウィングじゃないかな。
Shadowing.
Yeah, shadowing.
Yeah. What is shadowing? Well, first of all, I can help a little bit.
Thank you.
So shadowing is, first of all, shadow means kage. Right? And basically somebody will be speaking the language, a sentence, a story, whatever. And the intention, the purpose is for us to repeat or say the same thing that they just said.
同じことを言うんだよね。
We practice the pronunciation and the rhythm and the stress of the whole sentence. And we like train our mouth and our muscles to be able to say the same sentences that a native would say.
そう、口の筋肉。
Yeah.
すっごく大事。
Yeah. Shadowing is
そういうこと。よく英語のそのトーキングのレッスン、スピーキングのレッスンを受けるけどお金を払ったりして。けどその時に毎回先生が言うのはシャドーウィング、シャドーウィング、シャドーウィング。
Yeah.
だから本当に10秒でも5秒でもちっちゃいセンテンスでもそれを全く同じように言うっていう練習を1日何分でもいいからやって、そしたらもう全然変わってくる。すごい上手になったじゃんってそれですっごく言ってくるよね。ダルさんも青に。
Yeah, I mean, I notice it a lot when you are working on your pronunciation of a word, especially, because there will be certain patterns that you have from speaking Japanese with only I, U, E, O for your vowels, whereas in English we have like 12 or 16 or whatever sounds. And yeah, I can feel like when your vowels start to change and get a little bit more American. It's really fun.
Yay! でもなんだろう、その発音を意識しすぎて日本語にチェンジするときに今日はなんちゃかをしますみたいなわかんないけど、気持ち悪い日本語喋ってたりもしてるから、だからその難しいね、脳の違う、舌の使い方、口の使い方を2個の言語で、それこそ3個4個5個も言語違うの喋る人ってさ、もうどうなってるんだろうね。
Well, for one, a lot of people that speak that many languages don't speak them all fluidly. They just, they learn just enough to sound okay with their self-introductions and stuff. But of course, some people are very proficient at multiple languages for sure. But
憧れるわ。
Yeah, right. For a lot of people, it helps to have like a slightly different, it feels almost like you talk with a different voice, right? Like I'm sure you notice it, but when I switch to Japanese, sometimes my voice gets a little bit softer and a little bit higher. Whereas, when you speak in English, your voice changes a little bit too.
Yeah, I think so.
The whole way that we use our lips and our tongue and our cheek and our throat and everything changes a little bit.
表情も変わるし。
Yeah. Or if it's not changing a little bit for somebody listening, that's a sign that your pronunciation's a little bit too rooted in your native language still. Because Japanese feels completely different in my face and my mouth than English does, for sure. So if you could go back and give some advice to yourself when you were learning English before, back in Japan, what advice would you give yourself?
難しいな。何を言うかな、まず。もっとシャワーを浴びて、 英語のシャワーを浴びて。
英語のシャワ
ー？いや、英語のシャワーを浴びて、なんかこう耳で、こう、What?
The first time you said it, you didn't say like もっと英語を聞くとか、you said もっとシャワーを浴びて。
そうか、なんかただテイクアバースみたいな感じ。
Yeah, a little bit different.
もっと英語のシャワーを。
浴びつつく。
そう、英語のシャワーをもっと浴びて、日常的に。例えば、ずっと英語のラジオを聞くとか、あとは、英語のものに囲まれてみるでもいいし、環境を変えてみるだね。そこから、また自分でできることを探すから、まず一回環境をちょっと変えてみなっていうかもしれないな。関わる人とか。環境を変える。大事。ダル君は、まず、日本語を勉強するのでさ、話しても絶対聞いてて嬉しいと思う。
Yeah, what do you want me to share about?
ダルさんのジャパニーズの勉強の仕方を教えてください。
勉強の仕方。Well, when I first started studying, it was completely just self-study. I knew that I wanted to learn about it later, and I knew that I wanted to learn from a native speaker. I didn't want to just speak by myself in my room or whatever. So I did a bunch of the easy stuff that I could do alone before going to university. So yeah, so around the end of high school, I knew I wanted to study Japanese a little bit in college, even just on the side. And so I studied hiragana, I studied katakana, I studied my first like 100 or 200 kanji or so.
By yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I learned some of the very basic grammar, like some of the particles and that kind of thing. And then when I went to university, I was sort of ahead of everybody else who was in the first year classes because I already knew how to write, I already knew how to read.
かっこいいね。
And I was able to focus really, really hard on like my speaking and my pronunciation and the grammar and that kind of stuff. And so one thing that I thought was really important was to know why you're learning the language and what you want to do with the language. What I mean by that is somebody who wants to learn English so that they can read an English book, they're going to be studying very differently than somebody who wants to learn English so they can act in an English movie. You know, the person reading a book just has to learn grammar and vocab. The person who wants to act in a movie needs to really focus on how they stress their words, how they use their intonation, how they speak naturally, etc. Right? Very different ways of studying. For me, I knew that I wanted to be able to use the language to talk to people, to have experiences, to travel in Japan, to meet people and talk about culture and that kind of thing. So speaking was really important for me. So while in university, after classes, I would go to the teachers' offices and I would do extra speaking practice all the time. So I was there was a small group of us that would do that very consistently, people who really were really into Japanese. And so, of course, I'd go to class, I'd learn the grammar, I'd do my homework and whatever. I'd be listening to Japanese music and trying to read Japanese books outside of class. And then I'd be going to the office hours for the teachers and doing extra speaking practice. I took a whole class on my own online on onseigaku of Japanese.
音声学が発音とかに
発音 intonation, that kind of thing in Japanese. So like learning pitch, accent, and pronunciation and that kind of thing. And so once I had a really solid foundation in like everyday grammar, everyday words, and onseigaku, then it became much more self-guided. And it was like, you know, I really wanted to learn more kanji. So I studied more of that. I wanted to get better at listening. So I just started listening to lots of podcasts.
日本語のね。
Yeah. So lots and lots of listening. Trying to find like materials, just like you said, like you were having fun with English recipes, right?
Yeah.
I would try to find like podcasts with topics that I really liked in Japanese, or I would find a book that I really like in English, and I would buy the Japanese version. And reread it in Japanese because I already know I like it. I already know the context, the imagery, the ideas, but now I get to relearn the words and see how the translation is different.
楽しいよね。そこのレベルまでいけるようになったりさ、それを楽しめるって。
Yeah.
それがモチベーションだったのね。
Yeah.
聞こうと思ったのさ、何がモチベーションだったのって。
That's a good question.
そう。ひらがなの時から。
Yeah, great question. So for me, I was motivated by a fascination with some older aspects of Japan. I really was interested in samurai and Edo Jidai and Zen Bukkyo. And that kind of thing.
好きそうですね。
Yeah, so I was really interested in that whole world. I really knew that I wanted to speak another language, and I definitely wanted it to be a language that was very, very different from English. I did not want to learn Spanish or Italian or anything like that. I wanted a whole different way of thinking about and looking at the world. And
Japanese にたどり着いたと。
Yeah. So I was kind of just like having fun with it for my first semester, my first year of university. But it was after my first year of university that I ended up traveling to Japan that summer. And I can talk about that experience some other time. It would probably get pretty long to talk about it right now. But it was very life-changing for me. And even with my very limited 1 year of Japanese study, I progressed so much. I had so many powerful experiences there because of my Japanese ability and because of, being in the country, that it just immediately became a part of me. Like all these experiences that I shared with people and these places that I went and the things that I felt while I was living there, it made me feel like this is very important to me. And so it just made it feel very, very natural to continue studying and to get even better and share more experiences with the country and the language, just because it started to feel so natural.
そしてなんかフレッシュな感じするよね。
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess that was a lot of information. I talked for a long time. Thanks for listening again. But that was
ついてきたかな?
Yeah. That was sort of a summary of why I started studying it, how I studied it, and I guess how I think about it now. Is there anything that I missed?
どうやって勉強したか、どうやって。
Yeah. I think.
Yeah. ってスルーした。
If I had to give advice to anybody who's early in their Japanese studying who wants to get good quickly, it would definitely be think about specifically what you want to achieve, who you want to become through the language.
Okay.
And prioritize that for study. Generally speaking, I would also say set aside some time to go really, really deep into phonetics and pronunciation early on so that you don't end up watashi wa talking like an American, you know?
そうだ、それこそ最近さ、見たドラマがさ、ね、なんかそのアメリカのアクセントを、なんか、わざとやってる日本人の動画で、なんかすごく嫌だったって言ってたよね。邪魔するんでしょ、勉強の。そういうアクセント。
Yeah. Yeah, I know some people who they have, a relatively large amount of Japanese vocabulary has been studied and they understand it. But when they speak, it's very, very difficult to understand their Japanese for myself or for a Japanese person because the intonation is so American, the pronunciation is so American, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Not everybody needs to try to sound like a native speaker.
Yeah.
But if your goal is like mine, which is to communicate fluently and fluidly with native speakers, so that we can connect on a deeper level and talk about deeper things naturally, then please study phonetics, even if you're not perfect, because I am still not perfect at all. It helps a lot just to be a little bit more natural.
どういうのでさ、そのナチュラルに近づけると思う？なんかそれはいいと思うけど、どういう風にって。それこそシャドーイング？
Shadowing is definitely good. And first of all, I want to reiterate or say again that I'm not perfect. I'm not fully bilingual. I'm not Japanese. But just based on my own experience, shadowing is definitely good.
Yeah.
And sort of shadowing by checking yourself.
それ大事。聞くんだよね、自分で自分の声を。その後に。
Yeah. I think one of the things that helped me a lot was I would participate in speech competitions for Japanese. And one of the things that I would do to practice for them is I would have my teacher sort of record the script for me. And then I would record myself speaking the script and I would listen back over and over and over again. And I would just find all these spots where, again, I'm not trying to sound like an exact copy of my teacher, but I would notice weird stresses in places, my pitch accent changing in places where it wouldn't naturally, things like that. So recording yourself, listening to yourself, shadowing, and then just learning how it works. Like in English, for example, like words have stresses in certain spots.
Huh?
Words have stresses. Stress.
Yeah, なんか
in certain spots. Right. Like cupcake. Like has cupcake.
Cake.
Right. It's not cupcake. It's not cupcake.
Cupcake.
Right.
Cupcake.
Right. In the same way, Japanese has pitch accent. It's not taberu. It's not taberu. It's taberu. Right? They're very, very different. And every word like that, every word in Japanese has its own pattern, just like every word in English has its own pattern. So learning just how those work, why they work, the rules related to them will help a lot for sure.
時間がかかるね。
But it's worth it for sure. So we covered a lot of stuff. I think.
We did.
Is there anything else that you want to say to people who are studying English or Japanese right now?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
So I think we covered a lot of information.
いっぱいした。大丈夫だったかな？
大丈夫だったかな？
かな？
So thanks for listening to all of that, Aoi. Do you have any other advice or words of wisdom or anything to say before we sign off?
ないと思うよ。結構これでためになったらいいと思います。誰かの。
Yeah. And if anybody has any questions about more details or anything, please feel free to email us, Bilingual Fufu. That's bilingual fufu@gmail.com. Or we're on Twitter and we're on Instagram. It's all under in the description.
何でもしようね。受け付けてるよね。なんか発音コーナーやってとか。葵が英語ずっと喋って誰さんがそれを直してくっていうのでもいいし。よろしくお願いします。よろしくお願いします。
Yeah, I think that's everything. Bye bye.
さよなら。
さよなら。